This week, I want to detail my own experience going from electrical engineering into tech sales. I know I've talked a lot about different aspects of my career, and it's been a little bit nonlinear given my sports background and all of these different things. But the reality is, I worked 3 years as an engineer, and I just got to the point where I really hated it. So I wanted to do an interview format similar to what we've done with other candidates, so you can kind of see my thought process on the entire way going from engineering, burning out, not liking it, and then making that transition to tech sales.
All right, Eric. Thanks for joining. So a couple of questions. Obviously you coming from an engineering background, a little bit different than the previous interviews we've done, with other people in engineering is, most of them have come straight from school, even with engineering internships. But I guess for yourself, having worked as an engineer, what was kind of the moment for you where you're like, I've got to go in on sales?
Yeah, I think it was twofold. A little bit of context too. Like when I graduated college, I was a student athlete at the time and was training with the national team in the sport of team handball. And so it was this really weird thing where, again, a story for another time. But when I went to college, I didn't have the intention of necessarily being a student athlete. And then when I left, I kind of really wanted to keep playing. So that was kind of always in the back of my mind. And I would say two different things. Like my first engineering job was at a really large tech company. And a year in, I had a performance review that I felt just was like very KPI and stat driven. And aside from the specifics of that, it kind of became clear, like to no fault of a company of that size, but especially in engineering, like you're largely held accountable to kind of the KPIs and like metrics that are automatically tracked, regardless of your actual performance or regardless of other things that you've done. And so I guess succinctly answering the question, I left that company after 2 years, and then I went to a small startup and thought that kind of the startup environment would be a better fit for me, and in some ways it was. But I really got there and quickly realized I just wanted to get out of engineering as a whole. Like I was being worked 10 to 14 hours a day. Is really out of my control too, and we would bring up the reasons why to the leadership team, et cetera. And, hey, we're working on it, but it was really out of my control. And so I just got to the point where I was like, you know what, like for better or worse, I can't be an engineer anymore. I think I want to do tech sales, but again, a story maybe for a future question or another time. Like I quit, really no plans other than to train and play handball for a year overseas. And then when I got back, I knew I needed to be in something like sales to just have more control over my day to day and income, et cetera.
Got it. So, I mean, you mentioned, obviously the root cause was you couldn't be in engineering anymore, just, based on your own choice, like not wanting to deal with a lot of things you mentioned. Um, but I guess how specifically did you hone in on sales? Because there's a lot of, careers that maybe can be like slightly more performance based and slightly less. I don't even know the word. But there's like consulting, there's sales, there's tech sales, there's like real estate sales, there's all sorts of things. Like, how did you hone in on I want to go into this field of work, but this is the specific thing I want to do, i.e., higher tech SaaS sales.
Yeah, fair question. So two quick things there as well, especially when I was at the large company that I was at, I actually got exposure. It was a customer facing role. So I was a support engineer, worked my way up to supporting some more strategic accounts. And there were times where I was kind of trained a little bit on the sales enablement side. So if I was working with a company that was using like some older tech or mentioned in conversation while I'm troubleshooting something that, hey, yeah, long term, like I would ask, like, so this is fixed now. What's kind of the long term goal? Right. And if they were trying to do something that was either above the capabilities of the tech they already had, I would mention that. I would set up calls with our sales team, but the engagement would pretty much end there. And I kind of wanted to be a part of that. It's like, hey, I kind of uncovered this. It would be a lot of fun to keep driving that. So that's more on the technical side. And then to your point on why tech sales specifically, like beyond that exposure, when I did start interviewing, I did look at med device and tech sales pretty hard. There's a lot of med device companies that like to hire former athletes. But I realized going through that, given my past experience, given the engineering degree as well, like I got to third or fourth round interviews with med device companies and got to the point where I was starting to get offers on the tech side. And I actually stopped interviewing on the med device side because I realized I had a distinct advantage with the technical aptitude on the tech side. Like if I went to med sales, sure, I'm confident I would have done well over time, but I could start in tech sales. I've already had 2 to 3 years of really great experience with the types of people I would be selling to. So I just kind of started to realize very quickly I'd have a quick advantage there if I went that route.
Got it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I guess other question, in making the move, like we'll still stick kind of in the beginning here, like you're making the move at this point. You mentioned a lot of your previous role being a little more customer facing, right? Like you're talking to someone who currently has an issue and you're potentially recommending fixes, but then passing it on. Very, very similar to the BDR, SDR. For anyone who doesn't know, business development representative, sales development representative role within tech sales. So I guess it seems like it's almost kind of like a seamless transition. But I'm sure it wasn't exactly that for yourself. If you could maybe share where having a background like that helped you tremendously, which I think will be pretty clear to a lot of people. And then maybe where, you had to unlearn quite a few things coming from that kind of background to succeed in the new
Yeah.
role.
Yeah, I think especially on the things I unlearned, like we kind of talked a little bit about the process, how it aligns to the BDR, which is largely correct. A little bit of technical discovery. I think if I had to unlearn anything, it's going too deep technically. And I know we've talked about that before, but I would get in the zone with a customer or a prospect and be asking them 20 different questions about their database, in the example of the first company I worked at. And the reality is, like, after question 3, it's clear that they're doing something pretty complex that aligns well with what our enterprise offering does. And instead of trying to get more, set up the meeting right then and there, like say, hey, this is really cool. It sounds like you're doing a lot of great stuff that actually aligns with our enterprise platform. Would it be worth a discussion to look further at those capabilities, see how it maps on? And sure, once I get that meeting set up, if they're willing to hang around and talk, I can get more information. But you've really got to keep the sales process in mind in terms of keeping things moving forward, getting them to secure to a next step of getting in front of the account executive team, et cetera, as opposed to trying to know every little detail instead of progressing them through and trying to keep it moving and get them towards a purchase, if that makes sense. So
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I guess question there, because I think, even myself and the other engineers we've interviewed at this point, who didn't even necessarily work in a full-time engineering role, have echoed quite a bit that, being an engineer and learning the tech, you're going to be super solid on that piece. But everyone's mentioned the same exact shortcoming for all of us, which is we'll get too deep into the tech where it's not necessary. Because as we've mentioned before, like there's certainly a time for it. And I've even noticed with myself, right? I've started to have more success the more I've kind of pushed the tech towards the deeper into the sales process. So I guess for yourself, like how have you handled that? Have you like mentally got to that point? Because it's very hard to just turn the engineering brain off per se. So I guess how have you handled that?
yeah, I mean, I think especially early on, candidly, like you're going to be pretty bad at it. Like that's part of it. Again, that's very relative. Like I still came in with a very strong advantage as opposed to someone with a non-technical background. But yeah, I mean, candidly, especially early on, it's like the reason I know that I struggled with that is because I had calls where I lost opportunities or lost a chance to connect them with our account executive team because I got talking about things that candidly didn't even matter when I could have just connected them with an account executive, with a solutions engineer to further look at the product. So yeah, it's like, building awareness around that going in is going to help. But candidly, like that's part of sales, especially early on. That's why they put you in SDR positions because it's pretty low stakes in the grand scheme of things. And you're going to make mistakes and get them out of the way before you become an account executive working on bigger and bigger accounts. So
Yeah, absolutely. And then I guess, another question kind of moving down, the ladder of the career here at this point for yourself, like, you're in that SDR role, got promoted to account executive pretty quickly, and then went through the account executive ranks from SMB, mid-market, and now enterprise. I guess, what piece of advice, because, obviously from the outside, it all seems seamless. Like, oh, I got the SDR thing down, got the SMBAE thing down, got the mid-market thing down. Now I'm at enterprise and killing it. But I guess, like, what advice would you give for people who, especially coming from engineering, such a large mindset shift to be able to go into each one of those positions? Like, what advice would you give people for, I guess, kind of each stage of that process, right? Whether it's, hey, I'm a new SDR, some advice for them. I'm an SMBAE, some advice for them, and so on.
yeah, I think from the SDR position, I would look at this, especially at the SDR role, as internal and external. So like internal to your company, as quickly as possible, you want to show that you are a product expert. Again, not that in the case that you're not like writing lines of code, but you can show that you understand every single value point of the solution that you're selling. And over time, you're going to get really good at extracting that from customers through your questioning, right? So internally, you definitely want to position yourself as a product expert. By extension, externally, you could say the same thing, like be a product expert. But when you're talking to prospects, like a lot of times, again, this is just part of evolving as an SDR, but like it's great that you're asking questions, and that's kind of like step one. But can you get really good over time as you get repetitions in? And just from talking to so many different people, as soon as you talk to someone, you can quickly decipher what you think their problem is. And instead of asking the standard 5, 10, 20 questions you ask before you get to the main point, just get straight to the point and create that value for them to get into a meeting. And now as you transition to like, especially SMB and mid-market, they're usually able to get into a demo or get their hands on the product pretty quickly. So it transitions from, which is still necessary, you still need that SDR component of discovering value on a call and making it compelling to keep talking. But especially if you have like a SaaS product or something that folks can deploy through the internet, like start up a database online in a couple of clicks and they can start interacting with it. You have to have like great discovery still up front in that SDR mindset, but you've now got to get them starting to see value on your product very quickly. And that's a challenge that gets really difficult at the SMB and mid-market side, because a lot of times those companies, whether it's the CTO or their senior devs, whatever it may be, have a preference of tech they've worked with in the past. If they're having problems with that tech, you have a very small window of time to come in and displace that or sell on top of it or whatever it may be. So it's really understanding your product at a deep level, understanding the major value points that they're going to get by testing it, and like being very adamant and focused about getting them to see that value as quickly as possible, while still having a solid sales process in place to, before we start getting into it, like, hey, if we deliver this, if we deliver this, if we deliver this, are we ready to make a purchase kind of conversation, right? So, and then on the enterprise side, still newer to it, candidly. So still in my first full year as an enterprise rep, it gets much more challenging. And one of the things I'm finding as well is it's very, very important, especially at the enterprise level, to multi-thread. A lot of times you still have to have that technical champion that's going to work their way up into the account. But especially as you get introduced to leadership, as you get introduced to other stakeholders in the product, it's very important to try and keep a pulse across the org. And it's very difficult to do. But that's really what it takes to get a lot of buy-in and get through all of the politics and bureaucracy that just comes with selling to an organization with 10,000 plus people. So.
Yeah, I would say that's one of the more interesting things about sales compared to literally any other job function, right? You go from junior dev to like senior dev 4. The type of work you're doing is the exact same. The project is just more involved or more business critical. Whereas in sales, it's almost like, you go from SDR to SMBAE, like I've done myself. And it's like, you're taking bits and pieces from the previous role, but what you're doing is pretty different. Right, like even seeing you as an enterprise rep and myself as an SMB rep, and I'm sure you coming from the SMB mid-market side, you're doing a lot of the same things, like the discovery, the qualifying up front, but it's almost like two drastically different sales roles because of how different the orgs are you're selling to. Which I think is really something people need to take into account when they get into sales, is that you're not going to be, oh, I'm great as an SDR, now I'll be amazing as an SMBAE, and I'll be amazing as an enterprise rep. You're going to have to learn an entirely different skill set. So I guess, kind of on that note, what advice would you give to people similar to your position, right? Whether it's in an engineering career or in another career at the moment, looking to transition to sales, advice for, positive things such as like, hey, you'll figure it out otherwise. And then similarly, like, at what point would you tell someone in your position previously that, hey, I'm glad you're interested in tech sales, but this probably isn't for you if blank?
Yeah, I think a few different things. I definitely overthought how serious the change was. Like I think there's a lot more awareness around tech sales now than even when I graduated in the mid 2010s. But I think like one, if you're very, very early in your career, maybe you're a year into being an engineer, or you're coming up on college graduation, like no one's going to frown upon you trying sales for a year or so and then wanting to go back to engineering. And it's really just on you to keep up with your skill set, right? So I think especially if you're early, and you're considering it and you've felt very strongly about it for a sustained period of time, it's probably worth trying now, because it's only going to get harder to change later when you're mid to late 20s, when you're early 30s into sales. Not that you can't do it and can't be successful. There's tons of people who have, but mentally that burden just becomes more. It feels like you're completely throwing away the last, X amount of years of your career, right? I think in my case too, I dragged it out way too long. So I was very dissatisfied in my job to no fault of the companies. Engineering just wasn't a fit for my personality. And if you're to that place where you're fully dejected from your job and sales excites you, like no more need to think, like just do it, and like assuming you're living financially responsibly, put yourself in a position to like live below your means, live off of even less than your base salary, especially starting out. And the upside is definitely there, and it's definitely worth it. So happy to provide more as well, but that's kind of the first thing that comes to mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, kind of on that note, you mentioned for people, hey, this is a green flag, you should just get into it. We see a lot of people all the time though. They'll fill out a form on our website, come talk to us otherwise. And I know, you'll have the conversations with these people. I will, then we'll have conversations with ourselves. It's like, hey, glad that person is interested. I don't think they're going to be a good fit though. And I don't think they're getting into this for the right reasons.
Mhm.
Where do you typically see people making that mistake? And then in addition, like what sort of people situations otherwise would you caution against getting into tech sales?
Yeah, I think if one, if you on the cautioning against, just more broadly, like I've been very fortunate thus far. I don't take it for granted, but yeah, if you have some idea that you're going to start making a substantial amount of money like that, that's just not the case. It's like you've got to be in it for the long game. If you really want to do it, it's fine if you want to try it for a year and walk away. But like, there's also kind of no like half in, half out situation. Like if you're already thinking about, oh, what is, if it doesn't work out, at least I could do this. You kind of have to get away from that and so to speak, like burn the bridges and say like, hey, I'm going to do this for 3 to 5 years and we're going to see what happens, right? That would be the ideal scenario. And to your point on people that I speak with that are maybe coming from that STEM-based career and looking to make the change, it's one thing if you're very early in your research. So, if you are early, continue to do research. But what I really want to see when I'm talking to people who are making the change or coaching folks or whatever it is like, have you already started to think about the types of roles you want to work in, the types of companies you want to work for? Are you already talking about your past experience in a sales context? So it's like, and like to give more context to that, it's like if I speak with people and they're like, yeah, I'm just kind of tired with my accounting job and I really want more financial upside. And I saw tech sales and it looks cool. And like, I know, I think I can really put in the work and like do well. It's like, okay, yeah, like a lot of people have that thought, like we got to go beyond that and you got to do more research and really see, that there's a lot of people on YouTube that document tech sales. There's a lot of resources online to learn more about it. So if you're really serious about it, you don't have to tell me like, hey, I'm super serious about tech sales, but you're going to communicate that subconsciously by how much preparation and research you've already done before we've even spoken, right? So
Yeah. And then I guess kind of to wrap things up, like any sorts of advice generally, anything along those lines. I know we touched on a lot as far as like giving advice to people. But anything you want to call out, that in your own career you've seen other people be successful in doing, or otherwise just to share with everyone.
yeah, I mean, I think in my case, I think the biggest thing is like when I got into tech sales, I thought I genuinely enjoy it. And I had a lot of experience of not enjoying a different career. So I was very motivated and I didn't find it difficult to like be authentic or like, yes, I wanted the higher income side, but I was willing to do anything to like not be an engineer again. And so I think like for me, it's hard to say in a video and for someone to just grasp it. But over time, I really do think like the people who are genuinely interested in the job and the most authentic are going to be the ones that perform the best over time. And that sounds like so meta, cookie cutter. I hate even kind of saying that, but like all that to say again, it's like even tying back to the last example we were talking about, like if you come to me and you say like, yeah, like I'm not really crazy about my job and I want more income, it's like, okay, like, yeah, we all have that thought. I mean, there's,
It's table
real,
stakes.
yeah, like there's real estate billionaires out there making, billion-dollar transactions every day that have access to money that I in tech sales don't have. So like there's always going to be that person making more. There's always going to be that idea of a career where you can make more and more. But like for me, I'm genuinely interested and just try as best as I can to really be a product expert, really be the best at my job. And then whatever else happens. But there's been cases where whether it's like misalignment with management or however it is, like for the most part, I've been in situations where we have great leadership around us and they appreciate me just being open and honest and trying my best. So I think that's what I would say is like, it's hard to summarize that and make that not sound like a Hallmark card at a Target, but like, it's like, just, if you want to do it, like do it and be authentic. Like you don't have to be some high bravado salesperson. Just put in like as much work as you can, especially up front, and the rest will take care of itself. So
Yeah, absolutely. I love that overview. I think everyone at this point probably knows how to, but for people who want to reach you, reach out, ask questions. Otherwise, where can they find you?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll put my LinkedIn in this video for everyone's reference. I'll do my best to respond to. I still have people who find me and message me all the time. So doing my best to keep up with that. Obviously, our website, if you're looking to break into tech sales, at gujirecruiting.com. And for anyone really looking to extensively go through the SDR bootcamp, Ian and I actually made a full comprehensive course that takes you through not only understanding everything about tech sales, but email templates, cold call templates. We walk through every phase of the interview process, et cetera. So basically, without getting totally sidetracked, we used to coach folks one-on-one. We kind of ran out of time because we're both full-time employees in tech sales. And so there's a lot of great wisdom there. If you're really serious about breaking in, I would suggest taking a look at it. So any of those mediums, I'll do my best to reach out to everyone, but definitely, yeah, appreciate everyone who's made it this far. So,
Sweet. Thanks so much, Eric.
all right, thanks, Ian.